ability, which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Laura, and for the next hour I'll be reading from the May 3rd issue of the New York Times Style section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. George Clooney calls for unity at Lincoln Center Gala. The actor, who was honored at Lincoln Center's Chaplin Award Gala, denounced political violence after the attempted assassination of President Trump. By Sarah Barr. There was a commotion on the red carpet outside Alice Tully Hall at Lincoln Center in Manhattan on Monday night. George Clooney had just arrived. "I'm going to be 65 next week," he said, wearing a bow tie and flashing a boyish grin as he posed for the cameras. "It's astonishing." Clooney was there to receive the 51st Chaplin Award, the Lifetime Achievement Award that Film at Lincoln Center presents to an actor or filmmaker each year. But the actor, who has become known in recent years for his political views as well as his acting and directing career, took a moment in his acceptance speech to weigh in on current events. "I can't be here on a night like tonight and just ignore everything that's going on in the world," Clooney said at the end of his remarks, after he'd been honored by former colleagues, including Stephen Colbert, Juliana Margulies, Sam Rockwell, and John Turturro. "I disagree with everything that this administration stands for," Clooney continued. "But there is no place for this kind of violence we saw 2 nights ago in Washington. Nor is there room for this kind of violence in Minnesota with Alex Preddy or Renee Nicole Good." Clooney, who has been an outspoken critic of President Trump, did not explicitly name the president, who faced an assassination attempt at the White House Correspondents Association dinner on Saturday. But he spoke out against the extremism that many argue has contributed to Trump's rise. "It seems to me there's a struggle that has to be won against hatred and corruption and cruelty and violence," he said. "It's a struggle for the very soul of this republic, because to foment hate and violence is to inherit the wind." Clooney concluded with a call for unity. "The question is simply, as citizens of this great country, what are we to do?" he asked. And it is in that answer that all of us, left, right, and center, can build a more perfect union, heal our wounds, and begin to truly make America great again. An actor, writer, director, and producer who has won 2 Academy Awards in 2006 for his role in the film Syriana and in 2013 for his co-producing Argo, Clooney was being honored for his contributions to film and television, as well as for his humanitarian work. Past recipients of the Chaplin Award include Pedro Almodovar, Tom Hanks, Spike Lee, Sidney Poitier, Meryl Streep, Barbra Streisand, Robert Redford, and Elizabeth Taylor. Earlier in the ceremony, a smattering of Clooney's famous friends celebrated his longevity, levity, and philanthropy. Turturro, who starred alongside Clooney in Ethan and Joel Coen's 2000 crime comedy Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, recalled his humor on set. Turturro, who played a member of the chain gang, had his head shaved each day before shooting and used false rotten teeth. George would just bounce in with the energy of a lovable little 5-year-old, throw some dirt all over his face, put some pomade in his hair and comb it, and break into this big, beautiful smile, Turturro said of Clooney, who played Ulysses Everett McGill, a fellow convict. He said, "You see, I don't need makeup like you guys," he said. "It was kind of impossible not to love the guy." But it wasn't only toasts. Colbert, whose debut on The Late Show in 2015 featured Clooney as his first guest, came armed with some roasts as well. Clooney was being honored, Colbert said, not just for his talent and extraordinary philanthropy, but because all of us in this room wanted to be invited to Lake Como, referring to the home in Italy that Clooney shares with his wife, the human rights lawyer Amal Clooney. "Nothing's free, George," Colbert quipped. Around 8:30 p.m., Clooney himself took the stage. "It's funny, I did this scene in a movie last year," he joked, referring to his role as an emotionally stunted famous actor in Noah Baumbach's 2025 showbiz comedy Jay Kelly. "It's way more touching the way it happens in real life." The tribute was followed by a dinner of Arctic char and English pea risotto at candlelit tables in the promenade of the David H. Koch Theatre. The 350-some guests took turns approaching Clooney to congratulate him. "He is going to take pictures with everyone in this room," Colbert, who was seated at a long table in the center of the room alongside Clooney, joked during the tribute. "He is shy, so make sure you approach him." The indelible style of a queen off duty. A new exhibition takes a closer look at Queen Elizabeth II's wardrobe of boots, barn coats, headscarves, and tartan skirts. By Yola Mazizi. Queen Elizabeth II, the longest-serving British monarch, showed her nature as a satirical strategist from the very beginning of her reign. At her coronation in 1953, she wore a gown featuring embroidered motifs that nodded to places throughout the British Commonwealth. Elizabeth's rule, which ended in 2022 when she died at 96, coincided with the ascendance of the British fashion industry. She was loyal to homegrown brands, and in 2018, her patronage was immortalized with the creation of the Queen Elizabeth II Award for British Design, a distinction since given annually to a rising British designer. In her later decades on the throne, Elizabeth was known to favor bright monochromatic ensembles that she accessorized with hats, brooches, and a black handbag at the crook of her arm. Something of a uniform, the Queen's colorful attire seemingly reflected a philosophy that she once told a biographer, "I have to be seen to be believed." But just as indelible as Elizabeth's rainbow attire was her selection of understated rubber boots, barn coats, headscarves, and tartan shirts, items she often wore on trips to Balmoral Castle, her family's private estate in the rural Scottish Highlands. Many of those pieces, along with others from her expansive wardrobe, are featured in a new exhibition, Queen Elizabeth II, Her Life in Style, that opened at Buckingham Palace in London this month, timed to coincide with what would have been Elizabeth's 100th birthday on April 21st. Elizabeth's casual wear typically featured neutral shades that blended in with the bucolic environments where she wore it, and it was more relaxed than the finery that she sported for public appearances. For many people, seeing how she dressed in laid-back settings held a unique allure, explained Elizabeth Holmes, the author of HRH, So Many Thoughts on Royal Style. Those choices feel less about how they play in public, or for the photographers, and more representative of who that person is and what their style preferences are, Ms. Holmes said. The Queen's country attire also underscored her deep commitment to British fashion, said Caroline de Guitaut, the curator of the new exhibition. It's so British, and it's so quintessentially the essence of some of the best clothing produced in this country, Miss de Guitaut said. She added that the Queen's off-duty wardrobe was practical and inspired by her countryside pursuits, horseback riding, hunting, and hiking. It included suede jackets from Simpson, Balmoral tartan skirts, Burberry capes, Barber wax jackets, and Hermès handkerchief scarves, the rare item from a brand outside Britain. The new exhibition showcases many of these garments, several of which Elizabeth routinely had repaired or altered because of frequent use, Ms. de Guitaut said. That also goes back to the fact that she grew up during the Second World War, she added, where, of course, there was clothes rationing. There were shortages of things, and there was a lot of what we call the kind of make do and mend philosophy. Elizabeth's off-duty style has influenced designers in Britain and beyond. The English designer Richard Quinn, the first person to receive the Queen's namesake fashion award, said that her scarves were an inspiration for a coat in his spring 2018 collection. The Italian designers, Miuccia Prada and Alessandro Michele, have also nodded to the look. Mrs. Prada's 2024 Balmoral collection for Miu Miu included tweed handbags and chore jackets, while a 2017 collection designed by Mr. Michele for Gucci featured tartan skirts and headscarves. As part of the just-opened exhibition of Elizabeth's fashion at Buckingham Palace, several British labels were tapped by its organizers to produce promotional merchandise. It includes a Burberry trench coat with a dark green version of the brand's signature check print, a homage to the style of tartan favored by the Queen, £2,190 or about $2,957. Gloves made in collaboration with the leather goods brand Dents, about $128, and tartan socks made in partnership with Corgi, about $24. A knitwear label that shares its name with Elizabeth's preferred canine breed. Though the Queen's casual wear incorporated luxury brands like Burberry, the fact that a person could walk into a store and buy the same boots or barn jacket owned by Elizabeth created a personal connection to what she was wearing and in a way that was accessible, said Miss Holmes, the author. A lot of her other moments, especially the more glamorous ones, are not. We're headed for the most meta Met Gala yet. That's meta with a lowercase m, by the way. After a weeks-long promotional blitz for The Devil Wears Prada 2, the scene on Monday may feel very familiar. By Yola Mazizi. When a coterie of supermodels, actors, athletes, and musicians swan their way up the carpeted steps of the Metropolitan Museum of Art on Monday evening, many in the fashion industry and its spectators are likely to experience a sense of déjà vu. That's because the sequel to The Devil Wears Prada, which comes out on Friday, will have just opened with an early scene set on the steps of another venerable New York City museum, the American Museum of Natural History, one that is being similarly mobbed by stars and photographers. There's an expectation that the movie is going to be glamorous and fashionable, and a gala is kind of shorthand to get us there, said David Frankel, the film's director, of the decision to reintroduce Miranda Priestley, the steely editor of a fictional fashion magazine, in the context of a faux Met Gala. The weeks leading up to the real Met Gala, a starry fundraiser for the museum's self-financing Costume Institute, has been a whirlwind of cross-promotion, complete with sketches and editorial photo shoots aimed at elevating both the movie and the real-life publication that inspires it, Vogue. And all that synergy seems poised to result in the most meta Met Gala yet. This year, the cover of Vogue's May issue, which usually functions as a curtain raiser for the Met's spring fashion exhibition, features a photo of the magazine's longtime editor, Anna Wintour, alongside Meryl Streep, in costume as Wintour's fictional alter ego. Seeing Double blares a cover line on the winking portrait taken by Annie Leibovitz, When Miranda Met Anna. The Vogue Book Club's pick for April, you guessed it, The Devil Wears Prada, the 2003 novel by Lauren Weisberger, a former assistant of Wintour's, that provided the source material for the first film. Weisberger also wrote a personal essay in which she reflects on the lasting appeal of the film and her portrayal of a boss who filled her with abject terror. It, of course, ran in Vogue. 5 of the 9 episodes that the magazine's flagship podcast released in April tied back to the film. One even featured 3 of Wintour's former assistants dishing on their experiences working for the publishing legend, who is now the global editorial director of all Vogue titles. The magazine's new top editor, Chloe Mal, has made no secret of her eagerness to play into anticipation of the new movie, which comes 20 years after the release of the first film. When the team at Vogue learned about the forthcoming sequel, we all felt strongly that Disney shouldn't be allowed to have all the fun, Mal wrote in her May editor's letter. The Devil Wears Prada 2 conveniently hits theaters the weekend before the Met Gala, so if we wanted a cover tied to the film, it would need to be May's. Vogue and Disney, which owns 20th Century Studios, the film's distributor, have collaborated on the marketing of the movie, Frankel said. According to a representative for Vogue, the magazine's partnership with Disney took the form of paid advertisements on their platform and advanced screenings of the film, and the magazine's writers and editors were not paid to promote the film. Representatives for Disney had no comment on Thursday. It wasn't always such a love fest between the magazine and the film. When The Devil Wears Prada was released in 2006, many in the fashion world smarted at the portrayal of editors, designers, and assistants as haughty and complicated egoists whose behavior in 2026 could easily land them on the wrong side of human resources. The handling of the Miranda character, a towering magazine editor whose power and influence has the ability to shape a designer's career, was enough to spook many fashion insiders into refusing to be associated with the film. People were very nervous about offending Anna Wintour, and so cooperation from fashion brands and from designers was severely limited, Frankel said. It was often just a flat-out no. There were a couple of people who spoke to us on background and said, "Don't mention my name anywhere in your movie or around your movie." The recent change in attitude appears to be due in part to Vogue's embrace of the film, and the sequel is populated with industry figures playing themselves. Tina Brown, the former Vanity Fair editor and writer of Fresh Hell newsletter, Vanessa Friedman, the New York Times chief fashion critic, and Donatella Versace all make appearances, helping the film blur the line between reality and fiction. Did Frankel consider a Wintour cameo in the sequel? "There's even limits to our meta-ness," he said. Won't the endorsement of the establishment deprive the sequel of the bite of the first? Not according to Frankel, who insists that The Devil Wears Prada 2 is focused less on the fashion industry itself and more on the demise of print journalism. Last year, Vogue announced that it would release 8 issues per year, timed to major cultural moments, a departure from its monthly print cadence. Vogue's website also absorbed Teen Vogue and Vogue Business. Several plot lines in the new movie center on the challenges facing legacy media organizations like Vogue and its fictional counterpart, Runway. "Publishing has definitely not gotten any better," said Amy Odell, the founder of Back Row, a fashion newsletter and podcast, and the author of a 464-page Anna Wintour biography. The Vogue cover and its other tie-ins with the magazine are, for Odell, signs that Condé Nast seems to be increasingly in the business of viral moments. The Met Gala is one of those viral moments. The fundraiser is widely considered to be the equivalent of the Super Bowl for the fashion industry and regularly brings in tens of millions of dollars to the Costume Institute. So when stars make their entrances on Monday, showing off their takes on the evening's fashion is art dress code, they will be riffing, consciously or unconsciously, on a memorable defense of the fashion industry's importance, delivered by Stanley Tucci in the first movie. What they created was greater than art, because you live your life in it. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times Style section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Ryan Gosling's Project Hail Mary sweater is a hit. It's not for sale. A cardigan worn by Gosling's character in the blockbuster science fiction movie has become something of a breakout star. If you want it, grab your knitting needles. By Alicia Haradasana Gupta. Last year, windbreakers worn by Timothée Chalamet's character in the movie Marty Supreme sold out at pop-ups weeks before the film was even released. In recent months, the tortoiseshell headbands worn by Carolyn Bessette Kennedy and brought back in the FX series Love Story have created a frenzy at pharmacies across New York where they are sold. And now a cream-colored knit cardigan with foxes on it, worn by Ryan Gosling in the new sci-fi blockbuster Project Hail Mary, is a hit. But this time, fans can't buy it ready-made. And that's precisely what makes it all the more appealing. The sweater, worn by Gosling's character Ryland Grace, an endearingly unkempt schoolteacher and molecular biologist thrust into an interstellar mission to save Earth, with a rock-like alien creature Rocky by his side, is based on a knitting template from the late 1950s by the Canadian yarn and crafts company Mary Maxim. Fans are now making their own cardigans, taking TikTok or YouTube followers along on weeks-long knitting journeys and tutorials that have been viewed hundreds of thousands of times, and some are hosting in-person knit-alongs. The knitting kit at Mary Maxim sold out within a week of the movie's release, according to Mitch McFerrin, the company's chief executive and the great-grandson of its founder. There is a waiting list of over 1,000 people for a modern version of it. Maybe it's the fact that it's not that easy to get that people want it, McFerrin said. I have a lot of friends, now that this has kind of taken off, who are like, can you get me a sweater? And I'm like, well, I can get you the supplies. Jacqueline Ziegler, 25, started knitting her fox cardigan about a month ago and still has a week's worth of work left before she completes it. She has shared each step on TikTok and has found a receptive, enthusiastic audience. There have been so many people asking if they can buy the sweater from me, she said in an interview. Similarly, Leanne Anderson, 32, started knitting over a month ago and recently posted a picture on Threads of her completed sweater side by side with a still of Gosling. The next day I opened Threads and people were asking if I would like to make them sweaters, she said in an interview. And I was like, oh, wait, yeah. She reactivated her Etsy account and has since sold 6 sweaters for over $500 each. Her recent decision to increase the price to almost $900 hasn't deterred buyers, she said. The costume designers for Project Hail Mary, Glyn Dillon and David Crossman, were tasked with dressing Grace, Gosling's character, as an underdog, as someone who would seek daily comforts even when marooned in space, someone human as opposed to a slick, macho superhero. We were looking at knitwear and dressing gowns, all sorts of things, Crossman said in an interview. In 2024, Dillon, while out on a last-minute trawl for props and costume pieces, chanced upon a hand-knitted version of the cardigan peeking through racks of clothes at a vintage fair in North London. He bought it, thinking that if he didn't make it into the wardrobe rotation for Grace, he would keep it for himself. That afternoon, he took it with him to a fitting with Gosling. When we were with Ryan in the fitting room, he spotted it and loved it, Dillon said. So I had to give it up as being my own. The problem with the original cardigan, though, was that it featured snarling wolves and bloody paw prints, Crossman said, which the team thought might have been too much for a schoolteacher. They modified the design from a wolf to a fox and got a team of knitters on the job. Grace is seen wearing that cozy cardigan before liftoff, on an otherworldly beach, at a bar, and on the spaceship light years away from home. Dillon said he had his own collection of Mary Maxim cardigans, but that he didn't get to keep either the wolf or the fox version from the filming. Neither did Crossman. The movie, the biggest box office hit of the year so far, has drawn a vast, nerdy audience. There are countless Reddit threads discussing the accuracy of the astrophysics in the film. Book clubs are poring over the novel that inspired the movie. Even NASA's space engineers, in response to the astronauts aboard the Artemis II mission describing the scene before them, quoted Rocky's signature line, "Amaze, amaze, amaze." Then there are the crafters. Some are creating Lego versions of Grace and Rocky, while others are rendering them in embroidery patterns that can be downloaded from the movie's official website. People used to speak about going from owning a product to experiencing a product, and now it's about belonging to a microculture that surrounds a product, said Christopher Morency, a brand consultant and fashion journalist. Some consumers now value having to actually do something for it, more than just buying a logo t-shirt, he added. It feels like quite an affirmation, Anderson, the Etsy seller, said, that even in uncertain or chaotic moments, there is still meaning in what humans choose to make. We create music, art, and clothing by hand. A moth hole hates to see them coming. A group of students at Pratt Institute in Brooklyn is meeting up to mend clothes that might otherwise be thrown out. By Callie Holterman. Aria Hanna sat in a second-floor studio at Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, surrounded by garments that had seen better days. There were jeans with crotch holes and a t-shirt that was disintegrating at the collar. A pair of polka dot socks were practically begging to be darned. A moth hole is such a beautiful thing to have, said Hannah 20, a junior studying fashion design. It's just an opportunity for something new. She and the dozen or so students in the room make up Pratt's Mending Circle, a group of young people that convenes twice a month to sip bergamot tea and reinforce pocket linings. For a little over a year, its members have brought well-worn clothes from their closets, and some their classmates' closets too, and stitched them back into circulation. Hannah used a needle and thread to close up a hole in the navy blue wool coat she had been wearing all winter. She was next to Gianna Brang, 21, the club's president, who pinned a patch of cobalt fabric to a threadbare section of a friend's pants. In return, he had promised her a free tattoo. I love being able to help people repair things that otherwise maybe they'd just throw out, said Breing, a junior from Gilbert, Arizona. Like, let me show you how to fix that. Sewing circles have existed for generations, including groups organized through local churches in the 19th century, abolitionist sewing circles, and those that sprang up in response to textile rationing efforts in World War II. But mending skills have experienced a modest resurgence in recent years, and sewing and other hands-on hobbies are taking off among some members of Gen Z. The Mending Circle at Pratt draws mostly fashion design students who treat each distressed t-shirt as a creative prompt. How might a frayed hem be transformed with eye-catching embroidery? The club grew out of a series of meetups organized by Brooke Garner, 36, an assistant professor of fashion design at Pratt. She hoped to offer an environment in which students could decompress while working on clothing that had nothing to do with their schoolwork. I see it so clearly as an act of resistance against all these negative forces that we're up against, whether it's consumerist fast fashion or just this pressure to always be producing and making something new, Garner said. She gathered skeins of yarn, spools of thread, embroidery hoops, and old t-shirts to use as fabric scraps. Many supplies came from the neighborhood Buy Nothing group on Facebook. Only 2 or 3 students showed up at first, but eventually word of the Mending Circle spread. Everybody has a pile of clothes that need to be repaired, right? Garner said. During a mending session in late April, Garner put on a playlist of gentle piano music. Students filed in, chatting about the projects they needed to get done before the end of semester. Jacob Jenkins, 20, said he saw clothing repair as a practical necessity for his generation. I think we're at a time where we can't buy new clothes. We don't have the money, he said. He had big plans to embroider the canvas of a pair of worn-out Converse. Theo Goldman, 21, cut a laundry bag into patches that he was stitching to a pair of jeans. He is a fan of Sashiko, a Japanese form of needlework that is both decorative and fortifying. With the technique, a piece of clothing can be even stronger than it used to be, he said. When students wanted a break, they added embellishment to a fabric quilt that belongs to the whole group. Auguste Dubois, 22, wove a blue and green cord with a two-pronged tool called a lucet. Camelia Terreros, 21, repaired a hole in the pocket of her bomber jacket. Elena Schrerer, 20, knitted the sleeve of a cardigan from a lightweight Icelandic wool. What did she think was drawing people her age to mending? Honestly, there could be a deeper answer about climate change or whatever, but I think people think that it looks cool, Shearer said. Visible mending techniques create clothes that are not just newly wearable, she added. They are one of a kind. Most of the group's regulars said their mending skills had come a long way since they started showing up. Their work did not always come out looking perfect, but perfection was not the point, said Alma Rosado, 22, who wore a pair of her father's pants that she had repaired herself. I've learned more techniques, she said, but also more patience. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times Style section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Why has Christ is King become a controversial statement? For some, the three words have become encoded with a message of hate. By Nathan Taylor Pemberton. At a recent gathering of California Republicans, Senator Ted Cruz of Texas found himself on camera skirting a simple question. Would the senator be willing to repeat the phrase, Christ is King? Asked Dennis Fetisoda, 41, a Republican running for a Los Angeles congressional seat. Look, let me explain my hesitancy, Mr. Cruz began. A practicing Christian and Southern Baptist, he went on to repeat a loosely worded variation of the phrase, adding that the expression was associated with a weird online phenomenon. There are some using it in a hateful way, Mr. Cruz explained during the awkward exchange, which has been viewed over 1 million times on social media. The three-word declaration, Christ is King, may sound like a harmless statement of Christian values, but lately it has become the locus of a thorny linguistic debate. On one side sit supporters of America First style politics, who embrace a nationalism centered on Christian belief and whose loudest voices include the commentators Candace Owens and Nicholas J. Fuentes, both known for their anti-Semitic views. On the other are conservatives, like Mr. Cruz, who believe that the phrase has been weaponized against Jews. Across the online realm of the far right, the phrase is commonplace, embedded in posts and bandied about on podcasts. On platforms like X, MAGA influencers and young American First conservatives alike can be found posting it as a neutral proclamation. Political candidates running on America First platforms, such as James Fishback, a Republican candidate for governor in Florida, commonly use the phrase in their campaign posts. Many young conservatives paste it into their social media bios, often accompanied by an emoji of the Latin cross. And even Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who frequently invokes divine imagery while justifying military action, uttered the phrase during a speech in February. But the expression has an eye of the beholder quality and can be seen just as frequently in bigoted screeds from more extreme voices. Jake Shields, an MMA fighter turned right-wing podcaster, has used it in a troll-like way against Jews and Muslims. I use Christ as King because it makes Jews angry, he wrote once on X. Since 2024, Ms. Owens, a conspiracy-minded pundit and recent convert to Catholicism, has used it habitually, in the manner of a coda, in her high-profile feuds with other conservative commentators and in her attacks against Brigitte Macron. The flare-up over this phraseology comes during a long-running dispute with the Republican Party over mounting anti-Semitism within its ranks. Young Republicans in recent months have been linked to group chats praising Hitler and sharing bigoted remarks against Jews. What's emerged is a still unsettling tug-of-war between a younger cohort of conservatives drawn to Christian traditionalism and increasingly skeptical of America's ties to Israel, who view Christ is King as a declaration of their faith and political leanings, while an older set of Republicans, firm in their support for the Jewish state, view the phrase as an anti-Semitic provocation. Critics have called it a dialectical trap intended to other Jewish conservatives and drive them out of the right. In a recent interview with the Christian Broadcasting Network, Mr. Cruz said that saying Christ is King is just one way of saying I hate Jews. Mr. Cruz did not respond to requests to comment for this article. Alex Brusewitz, a 29-year-old MAGA influencer who was a former advisor to President Trump's 2024 campaign, defended the phrase in response to Mr. Cruz's condemnation. It's not anti-Semitic to say Christ is King, Mr. Brusewitz pointed on X. It's the truth. The expression has deep ties to the Catholic Church, having been first popularized by Pope Pius in 1925 as a response to rising nationalist sentiment. In contemporary times, it has largely fallen out of use. The idea that Christ is King is nothing new to the Church, said Mike Cosper, a Christian journalist and podcaster, who noted that the phrase can also be found in texts from the Protestant Reformation. But it's not exactly a common phrase in today's church, and I'm not even sure why the far right has latched onto this particular expression. To Mr. Cosper, Christ is King, as the phrase is used today, has been largely stripped of any doctrinal meaning and reshaped into a hostile cultural signifier. An analysis conducted last year by the Network Contagion Research Institute at Rutgers University, which studies online extremism, found that the expression surged in popularity among far-right users on social media beginning in 2024. The report also noted a 400% increase in its use over the past decade, and said that users of the phrase often paired it with discriminatory language directed against Jews and Muslims. Its more recent reemergence as a hyper-politicalized idiom has largely been because of Ms. Owens and Mr. Fuentes, who have transformed an esoteric religious declaration into their own digital clarion call. Mr. Fuentes' followers are known at public marches and political conferences to break into chants of Christ is King, in the style of a macho sports slogan. Mr. Fuentes has been unambiguous about why he says it. It's a very quick way to identify who is with us and who is part of the church and the body of Christ and who's outside it, he explained last year during a live stream. He added, Christ is King is something Jewish people cannot participate in. Joel Finkelstein, one of the authors of the Network Contagion Research Institute report, said the phrase has been co-opted by a subset of bad actors on the right who have turned it into a loyalty test. It creates a shibboleth, Dr. Finkelstein said, which is necessarily exclusionary and used to beat opponents over the head with. On the far right, those who use Christ as King admit that the expression is intended to be used as a wedge, but they insist that this doesn't amount to anti-Semitism. Elijah Schaffer, a far-right influencer who hosts the podcast Slightly Offensive, makes frequent use of Christ as King, often slotting the phrase into his posts on X like a glib non sequitur. He recalled first hearing it used in a political context by supporters of Mr. Fuentes during a Stop the Steal rally in 2020. A vocal supporter of America First ideology and a professed Christian, Mr. Schaefer did not see anything offensive in the saying. It's not about eradicating Jewish people or disenfranchising their right to exist. It's a statement that reestablishes the hierarchy of Christianity as supreme ideology above loyalty to Israel and to Judaism, he said in a phone interview, comparing the expression to something of a greeting among far-right adherents. And there's nothing wrong with that, Mr. Schaefer added. Some of the right's younger rank and file, who increasingly intertwine their Christian faith with America First stances, particularly on the topic of foreign influence, are frustrated that the term is now linked to Mr. Fuentes and his ilk. Nate Fagan, 22, a conservative content creator who posts about biblical masculinity, describes the phrase "Christ is King" as the most true statement in my life. But he believes that Mr. Fuentes has hijacked what he considers to be a pure statement of faith and turned it into something that doesn't reflect the teachings of Jesus Christ. It's being used as a troll sort of comment, Mr. Fagan said. When I think of how Nick uses it, he'll say something absolutely disgusting. He'll use the N-word, for instance, and then in the same sentence he'll say Christ is King. He added, I don't think that should be used as something political, but it should influence politics, if that makes sense. The toxicity of the phrase within certain conservative circles has led to professional blowback for some who use it. Ms. Owens is said to have been fired from the Daily Wire in 2024 for her repeated use of Christ is King, according to Andrew Clavin, a host for the conservative website. Through her publicist, Ms. Owens declined to comment. In February, Carrie Prejean Bowler, a MAGA influencer, was removed from President Trump's Religious Liberty Commission, which had gathered to discuss the rise of anti-Semitism after she sparred with fellow appointees over the meaning of the phrase. As this debate drags out, some conservatives have begun to express a familiar wariness over the policing of language. As they see it, the right, which has long claimed to be a shelter for controversial thought and speech, is now dictating what can or cannot be said. It was this thought that was on the mind of Mr. Feitosa, the Republican who cornered Mr. Cruz this month. I was actually kind of taken aback when I heard Senator Cruz say that it was anti-Semitic, Mr. Feitosa said in a phone interview. I was very confused to see somebody in my party saying something like that. A former content creator who would post about America First topics, Mr. Feitosa described himself as a lifelong Catholic and said that the expression had always been there throughout his upbringing in the church. As for there being ill intent behind his run-in with the senator, Mr. Feitosa claimed innocence. I was curious to see if he would say it, Mr. Feitosa said. This question came from a place of faith. He added, we agreed to disagree, and that's reasonable. But I do disagree with him. It shouldn't be controversial to say it. Christ is King. You should be able to say it. Social cues. Can I skip my niece's graduation to avoid the politics? By Philip Gallanes. My beloved niece is graduating from the U.S. Naval Academy next month. She has invited me to attend her graduation ceremony. Typically, the president, the vice president, or one of the president's cabinet officials addresses the midshipmen and their families as the commencement speaker. But listening to a self-serving speech by any of these individuals would be nauseating for me given our current geopolitical situation. So I'm inclined to skip the graduation ceremony and to attend the family party afterward. But that means I would miss watching my niece collect her diploma and make her first salute as a commissioned officer. Will she think I chose politics over honoring her achievement? And short answer, yes. Your niece will probably believe that you are prioritizing politics over her graduation if you skip the ceremony and attend the party a little later, because that is precisely what you will be doing. And that may be necessary for you. I am not here to judge your political or moral beliefs, but let me remind you that there is no Republican Navy or Democratic Navy. The armed forces protect all Americans. Now, I don't mean to minimize the tremendous influence that a sitting president wields on military matters while in office, and you may object fiercely to the current president's military choices, but elected officials come and go, and it would be wrong to conflate politicians with the brave men and women who dedicate their lives to defending our country in the armed services. The president may be commander-in-chief, but only until the next one is sworn into office. Still, I understand your ambivalence about attending a ceremony that features a speaker with whom you may disagree strongly. So how about excusing yourself for that portion of the ceremony, provided that the actual speaker this year is objectionable to you? If attending is still impossible, make sure to explain your absence to your niece in a way that distinguishes politics from the greater cause to which she is dedicating her young life. Sometimes a stop isn't just to smell the roses. I was walking my dog on a leash recently when he stopped to sniff some flowers at the edge of a neighbor's yard. My dog was standing on a public sidewalk. My neighbor asked me to stop my dog from doing that. She said it attracted other dogs. I figured she couldn't see that my dog wasn't peeing, so I said, "Oh, he's just sniffing." My neighbor replied, "This is not a dog park," and turned away. This same neighbor has spoken to me harshly about my dog before. What is the best way to respond? Dog mom. Over decades of walking a string of much-loved dogs, I have observed that sniffing, flowers, sticks, bird poop on the sidewalk, can turn into peeing in a split second. And dog urine can kill flowers. So despite your sound argument that your dog was not trespassing and your dislike of your neighbor's snippy tone, focus on being a good neighbor. Keep your dog moving briskly past this neighbor's yard. Responsible dog owners are sometimes forced to pay for the sins of irresponsible ones. Your neighbor seems to dislike dogs, and it's unlikely that you will convince her to make an exception for yours. For help with your awkward situation, send a question to socialq@nytimes.com. Modern love. The girl with the sunglasses tattoo. My daughter left me way too young, so I find ways to keep her with me. By Lindsay Scharf. I'm getting a tattoo, I told my 4-year-old son Reed as I helped him into his car seat during preschool pickup last fall. His face lit up. Are you getting my name? I kissed his cheek, closed his car door, and tried to collect my thoughts. I should have seen this question coming. I only have one other tattoo on my left forearm. It says Evan Francis in beautiful cursive script. When my daughter, Evan, was 1, I was scrolling on Instagram when I spotted a black and white photo of a man's upper arm that featured 4 female names in delicate handwriting. I saved the image thinking that one day I would use it as an inspiration for my own tattoo. Unfortunately, that time eventually came. For my 40th birthday, my husband Michael took me to get my first tattoo to commemorate Evan, who had died 1 year earlier. She had been born with a rare mitochondrial disease. We were told her life expectancy would likely be short and understood we were operating on borrowed time. Evan died in 2022, 10 days before Mother's Day and just 3 months shy of her 4th birthday. Reed is now only a handful of months older than my daughter was when she died. Not a second goes by when I don't hear Evan in songs and wind chimes and see her in books, ladybugs, and full moons. But mostly I feel her presence whenever Reed says or asks something surprisingly poignant. His preschool teacher recently shared that they were learning about pollination in class when he raised his hand and announced that his sister was like a bee that couldn't pollinate anymore, so she died. I'm not sure where he got that. He was only 3 months old when Evan died, but he has come to know her through our daily routines and conversations. We sing Evan's songs, read her books, and we say goodnight to her. As part of our evening ritual, I blow a kiss to a framed photo of Evan on our mantle that sits next to a wooden urn with her ashes. I kiss the urn's two edges, which represent to me Evan's perfect, juicy cheeks. On top sit her glittered hot pink cat eye sunglasses, sparkling almost as much as her eyes in the photo. I glanced at Reed in the rearview mirror and thought, what should I tell him about my new tattoo? Because I have no intention of ever getting one with his name on it. Everyone has a different philosophy about tattoos and their meanings. The man whose arm I had seen on Instagram all those years earlier was, as it turned out, Matt Damon, who had added his 4 daughters' names to his upper arm. I only realized this when I read the tiny caption on the image I had saved years before. But I never would have gotten a tattoo if I didn't feel a need to keep Evan close. How does one explain that to a 4-year-old? Reed keeps me on my toes with his unexpectedly insightful questions, but it's often a challenge to find the right words. Well, buddy, I finally said, glancing at him again in the mirror, I'm lucky because I get to see you every day, and I get to spend so much time with you. But I don't get to do that with Evan. That's why I got Evan's name last time. It's how I can spend time with her. Does that make sense? Yeah, he said. So I'm actually getting Evan's sunglasses on my other arm, I said. Her pink ones? Yes. He smiled, then said, Theo and Monty don't take a nap at school today. I told them you need to take a nap, but they didn't listen. Crisis averted. For the moment, anyway. I had been considering a second tattoo for 2 years when an invite arrived in my inbox for a fashion event with a tattoo artist named Benny Shields. I'm a lifestyle writer, so I'm often invited to unique showcases. My husband and I looked up Benny's Instagram account and discovered he was the artist behind Jeremy Allen White's various tattoos, both personal and for Carmi in the Bear. I signed up. 3 days later, there I was, at a newly opened coffee shop and wine bar in East Los Angeles, getting Evan's signature shades tattooed on my right forearm opposite her name. Do you mind me asking what the sunglasses represent? Benny asked, as he set up near a case of fresh pastries. After I explained, he said, We've got to get this right, knowing how much it means. When I showed him a picture of Evan, his eyes widened. I've seen her before, he said. I think maybe your husband and I follow each other on Instagram. My heart swelled. That's how memorable my little girl is. With that, Benny began the process, shaving my arm, transferring and positioning the stencil. Then came the first poke. How does that feel? He asked. I tried not to wince. I mean, I've given birth twice. How bad can this be? But the truth is that my barometer for that's the barometer for most things these days. That paired with the IVF process I went through for my son and the fact that my daughter was poked and prodded by doctors on a regular basis out of medical necessity. Evan went through so much more than many adults do in their lifetimes. So in the grand scheme, what's a needle other than a reminder that we can survive hard things? Over the next hour, Benny took his time, stopping to consider each fine line. Meanwhile, we talked about life and the fact that no one gets out unscathed. The act of recreating Evan's signature shades was more than a tattoo appointment. It was a therapy session. With each poke of the needle, I couldn't help but think that tattoos truly are a metaphor for learning to feel the pain and to endure it. As the minutes passed and the poking continued, I eventually became numb to the feeling. The burning sensation remained from start to finish. But just as with the emotional trauma, my body learned to brace itself, anticipate the hurt, and keep going. Now, every time I look at my beautiful, joyful tattoo, I am reminded of that. And of my beautiful, joyful little girl who brings happiness to anyone lucky enough to spot a photo of her on Instagram. Which is why I was both surprised and appreciative when a newer friend, who had never met Evan, was admiring my tattoo. Does it hurt to look at it? She asked. I welcomed the opportunity to explain. I love thinking about Evan, I said, and I long for any excuse to say her name. The beauty of a tattoo is more than what meets the eye. It's both a meaningful reminder and potential conversation starter. Talking about Evan keeps her spirit alive, and eyeing her etched, oversized sunglasses reminds me of everything she taught me about shifting perspective and seeing life through a different lens. She had every reason to cry, but she smiled between tough moments. So when I look at my tattoo, I think of her angelic face, clad in her cheerful shades, and I smile, knowing I wouldn't be the mother I am today without having fought so hard for her. When I picked Reed up from school later that day, I showed him my new ink. "What do you think?" I asked. "It's too big," Reed said. "Daddy could have done it smaller for you," he added, likely thinking of the cutesy Paw Patrol and Bluey temporary tattoos he often gets in birthday party goodie bags. Later that night, Reed crawled into my bed. With Michael out of town, I figured, why not? These precious moments are fleeting, which I know all too well. Reed planted himself on my pillow and squared his face so that we were nose to nose. "Mommy," he said, "I have a question." This is usually when he'll ask something random like, "Did you know my friend Jojo doesn't like bananas anymore?" Already half asleep, I said, "Yes, Reed." "Will you take me to the guy who did your tattoo?" "Buddy, you're just a kid," I said. "You can't get a tattoo. You can have temporary tattoos. If you still want one when you're 18, then yes, I'll take you." "Yeah, when I'm an adult, I want you to take me to the guy who did your tattoo." "Okay, buddy, sure," I said, "when you're an adult." "I want to get Evan's name," he said, "and her sunglasses." "You do?" "Yeah, because I didn't get to spend enough time with Evan either." You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the May 3rd issue of the New York Times Style section. Your reader has been Laura. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the USA Today. Following that at 2 o'clock is episode number 3 of Ira Gershwin by Michael Owen. Stay with us for these readings and more. You're listening to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, broadcasting daily readings 24 hours a day of newspapers, magazines, and books to area people who are blind or have a print disability, who are provided reading radios. Radio Readings broadcast signal is provided at no charge by WNED. Radio Reading Studios are at 1199 Harlem Road in Cheektowaga, between William and Clinton Streets. Radio Reading's website is nfradioreading.org. For more information on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, call us at 716-821-5555.
The Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of